I think it's time to start looking at Ime Udoka. And I think a lot of you guys know I'm a Celtics fan. I'm a huge fan of Udoka, the basketball coach, maybe off the court, not so much, but the basketball coach really does excite me and what he could potentially bring to this team. So I thought today, slow day, no Astros yesterday, would be a nice day to take a look at what Udoka can bring to the table. Udoka, at his press conference a couple of weeks ago, explained why he wanted to join the Rockets. And I mean, this is what you're looking for. What he says right here, it's kind of obvious. We all have a sense that this is the case with this Houston roster. He really likes the young talent here.
Obviously, a destination that's very attractive to players, but also just a young talent. It always starts with the players. Besides these guys getting to know everybody, and that was pretty natural off top, but it comes down to the players. And I think we have a tremendous amount of young talent. Sky's the limit as far as that. They talked about cap space and some of the flexibility we have, and I think they've done a great job building for the future. And so I'm excited to be part of that and look forward to the moves we can make coming up in the draft and free agency.
Very curious as to what moves Udoka would want in free agency with all that cap space. It does circle back to James Harden. Does feel like Philadelphia fired Doc Rivers to appease James Harden. Daryl Morey, he loves him some James Harden. So perhaps we won't have to worry about a possible Harden reunion with Houston. I don't feel like Udoka would be thrilled with it, but I do think Udoka would find a way to make it work. But you heard him say it right there. The young talent is a reason that he's here. In a piece that Kelly Eco put together in The Athletic, outlines basically the timeline of Udoka's meeting with Houston Rockets brass and the conversations that he had. When he was first asked about the current roster and how he would get the most out of the group, Udoka opened by admitting the team was more talented than he had initially assumed after he watched some games that he had been assigned to watch, saying, "I love the youth athleticism, upside, and potential. It was really eye-opening to me when I got a chance to dig into the film and watch 10 or so games leading up to the interview. Other than playing against them twice, I hadn't seen them on a lot of different stages. Really became eye-opening. The more I watched and got insight, the more excited I was." And Udoka said this to Rockets brass: "A willingness to be open and creative with a Rockets roster featuring different types of players. Most importantly, he would bring order to a team that was beginning to grow accustomed to chaos." You could bleeping say that again. That's one of the things that drove me crazy about this last year. It's one of the reasons that I really did wonder, Raphael Stone, not a lot of qualifications to be the general manager, what the hell his actual vision was. But I do like the hire that he made. As far as the hires that have been made this offseason, yeah, DeMeco Ryans intrigues me a lot, and I think a lot of Texans fans should be excited just given the incomplete lack of buzz in this organization. He might be a very good coach, but Udoka, we have seen him do it before. We saw Udoka take a team that had a lot of chemistry issues, a lack of understanding of roles, and he was able to make that team into a finals team by the end of the year after taking over for a coach in Brad Stevens who had been there for a really long time. Udoka excites me more than Ryans. He does. And I don't like saying this because in basketball it is about the talent that you have, but Udoka is right now, before we see what Jalen Green can be, before we see what Jabari Smith Jr. can be, he is the Rockets' greatest asset. It's his ability to get more out of those guys. And you loved what you saw from Smith Jr. down the stretch. I didn't love what I saw from Green this past season. I feel like it was a plateau of a year for year two for him. But I loved what I saw from Alperen Şengün as well. So as far as the vision that was in this article from Kelly Eco, from both Raphael Stone and Tillman Fertitta, we want somebody who has a real vision of how to implement our young guys and incorporate veterans, a dynamic presence and vision, a voice that resonates with our group. And the ownership likes the coaching acumen that he has. So from an ownership perspective and from a Raphael Stone perspective, okay, like, I know I've been rather hard on Raphael Stone. I like what he said, though, in the build-up to bringing Udoka aboard. The only thing that really annoys me about where the Rockets are right now is that in this piece by Kelly Eco, Patrick Fertitta, Tillman Fertitta's son, seems to be very involved. And maybe it's unfair to assume the worst out of, let's be honest, Lucky Sperm Club, the son of a very wealthy person. But I'll be honest, it does feel like Patrick is perhaps getting to learn on the job, and it does feel like there's a relationship that the Fertittas have. Maybe it's Patrick and James Harden. Maybe it's Tillman and James Harden that I don't know. I just don't like it. But anyway, the other thing that that Ime Udoka said at the press conference that really excited me is that youth is not an excuse. About bleeping time we heard this.
They heard me say it, and the players, one of my first messages will be youth is not an excuse. And so across the board, I think, whether it's making the same mistakes, not making the right defensive assignments, poor shot selection, all that stuff has to be addressed but also improved on. And so understanding that we're going to take some lumps with our age and our youth, but my message to them will be that's not an excuse. You've been in the league, you've been taught, and that's my job to teach them and expedite that process. So understanding that, having some patience with that, just like I had to do in Boston. Had to change some habits there as well, even though those guys were more of a veteran group and guys who have been around, but it's no different from anywhere else.
So I love hearing that from Udoka. And one of the big frustrations that I have as somebody who has, let's be honest, this is going to sound condescending, but honestly, I feel like Rockets fans need to hear a little bit of this condescension. As someone who's grown up watching good sports teams, Patriots, Celtics, my two favorite teams, Celtics have been a model of consistency since 2008. Yeah, there have been some years where they haven't been good, but for the most part, that team has been awesome, and they have been well run, and they have preached the idea of accountability for a long time. There's a high standard there. There's a high standard growing up and watching that Patriots team. And yeah, I get it. It's insufferable, and a lot of you guys get so pissed off when I bring up Austin, but I have high standards. You guys should have high standards too. And it bothers me that a lot of Rockets fans just continuously go to the youth well as an excuse for this team and the underachieving and the lack of progress. And I hope that now that Udoka's aboard, that you guys are going to shut the hell up and get on board with this idea that just because you're young is not an excuse for a guy to not make any progress. Like, we all need to get on this page. I don't want to sound like I'm so negative about a bunch of young guys in the NBA, but some of you people with the red Rockets colored glasses are just snorting lines of sunshine and mainlining all of the rainbows you can, and you need to stop. This team is capable of more if it's talented. If you believe in the talent, what we've seen the last couple of years isn't enough. Obvious for anybody. But the diehard Rockets people, specifically the online crowd, doesn't know how basketball works and thinks iso ball is good based off of the James Harden era. Those people need to be propped up against the wall and slapped a couple of times the way that Michael Corleone slapped Johnny Fontaine. You can act like a man! What's the matter with you? And yes, I'm promoting violence. I am promoting violence. It's fine. I'm not bringing a gun to the equation. I'm just saying, you guys got to stop with the excuses. Udoka, his arrival here, it's a sign. All of our standards need to be raised. The last couple of years, with the Texans, with the Rockets, there's a team in town that is essentially perfection, the Astros. And, man, there's too many people that follow those teams, and I just do not understand the excuse making, the patience, the optimism. No, high standards, mother lover. Did have a comment from the 346. Name one young team that won, because the Patriots had Brady for 86 years. Well, I'm going even further back because OG Patriots fan here. The 1996 New England Patriots made it all the way to a Super Bowl. They were helped out by the Jaguars upsetting the Denver Broncos in the second round of the playoffs because Denver would have killed them. Denver, 96, 97, 98 was probably the best team in the NFL. Packers were number 2. I look at that team, which had all sorts of players for the Patriots who would play for the dynasty run, the 3 years. That's where Willie McGinnis, that's where Teddy Bruschi, Ty Law, they were there during that moment in time. And Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback. That team was really young. And because they made it to that Super Bowl, they, a couple of years later, when Bill Belichick comes in, were able to make it. So it starts by building a foundation and having a coach that holds everyone accountable. Bill Parcells did a great job when he first came on the job in New England. Pete Carroll comes in. It just did not vibe with that locker room. Pete Carroll's a good coach, but that style is not for everybody. It's the complete opposite of what Parcells was doing. Belichick comes in. It's more the same Parcells stuff. As far as other young teams, and if you want to talk about Boston references, take a look at what the Boston Celtics did in 2016 and 17. Jaylen Brown's a rookie. Isaiah Thomas was probably their best player that year. He had a crazy season, but Marcus Smart, I think he was in his second year in the league. You had Terry Rozier, who I think also was in his – check that. Marcus Smart was in his third year. Terry Rozier was in his second year. He had a crazy playoffs. The next year, they get Jason Tatum. You saw right from the get-go there was a young foundation there, and it's not like – I mean, yeah, Kyrie Irving was there, but how much did Kyrie Irving help at first? It's possible to win with a young team. Win a championship, okay, maybe that's maybe asking too much, but – I think that what we've seen from the Rockets the last 2 years, given the young talent that everyone seems to agree that they have, is completely inexcusable. They've been, 29th in the league? Come on, they're better than that. Anyway, if you want to weigh in on who you're more excited about, DeMeco Ryans or Ime Udoka as head coach, you can. JC is calling in at 713-780-3776. JC, what's up?
Hey, really enjoying the topic you guys are talking about this morning. I'm more excited about Ryans from a football standpoint because he brings an element to the coaching that we haven't had in the history of our franchise.
What's
Someone
that?
who's been in the trenches. He's been in the trenches, done it before, and now he's a head coach. He's proven that he can lead on the defensive end, and now that he's given a chance to be a leader of the whole team, I think he's going to bring that accountability back to each position, not just the defensive side of the ball, but just holding the players to a higher standard because he's done it. So he's going to show them how to do it.
Interesting that you bring that up, and appreciate the phone call, JC. The fact that DeMeco played, because he did. And Lovey did not play at the NFL level. Bill O'Brien obviously did not play at the NFL level. Gary Kubiak did play at the NFL level. He was John Elway's backup quarterback in Denver. And Dom Capers, to my knowledge, I don't think he played. So this is new in that Ryans was a starter, Pro Bowl caliber player who really was damn good with this team. And he played for this team too, which is just an added wrinkle on top. So he's familiar with the city, which I don't know how much of a perk that is to have, if you're a young player bouncing things off of a coach, but it is something. It's a guy who's familiar with the organization, the way that it's been run for a long period of time, has his own new ideas about it perhaps. But on top of that, keeps some sort of continuity going. All those things are intriguing. I do think, though, from a head coach perspective, there's a lot of delegation that goes on. And Ryans is going from being a defensive coordinator to now being in charge of an entire football operation. Not to say he can't do it. It's just it's a big change. Some guys are better at that element than they are at being the specific individualized coach. I would point to Mike Vrabel in Tennessee as that. Mike Vrabel as a linebacker coach with the Texans did a very good job. We moved to defensive coordinator. It wasn't that good. But then he gets the head coaching gig with Tennessee, and I think as a delegator, he's done a damn good job there. Tennessee's been winning with Ryan Tannehill under center, for God's sakes. As much as we don't like the Titans here, yeah, it's been pretty impressive. We also have Thomas calling in at 713-780-3776. Who are you more excited about, DeMeco Ryans or Ime Udoka? We were talking about one of the pieces about Ime Udoka this over the last couple of weeks. Thomas, what's going on?
I think the cop-out answer is excited for both. Obviously, they're both hyped up. They were both cream of the crop type hires. But I guess even in real, I would imagine in my mind, I theoretically can come up with hypotheticals where Ross gets achieve success sooner. So I guess I'm more excited about that. There's just so many things that as you said, there's a going to be a bigger learning curve for DeMeco Ryans as being the head coach.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that have to fall into place, making the right hires at your position coaches.
Right.
And then there's just so many more holes to fill on a 52-man roster. While with the Rockets, you can say that, there's a lot of potential at all your starting spots. And then have cap room to bring in some vets to make the noise. So you can definitely make a play for the lottery. I visualize that more. But, yeah, I'll hang up and listen, man. Thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the phone call, Thomas. I would say this, too, as far as Ryans goes. This is an unfortunate dynamic for NFL coaches, and we talk about delegation. Offensive coordinators, they're very hit or miss. And it seems like these days a head coach is beholden to that offensive coordinator. So take a look at the history of the Texans. Gary Kubiak was basically running the offense when the Texans made the playoffs. Rick Dennison was the offensive coordinator then. But before that, when Matt Schaub was putting together his incredible years, who was on that coaching staff? I mean, you had Mike McDaniel was there for like a cup of coffee. Kyle Shanahan was the actual offensive coordinator. There are others off the top of my head who were here with the Texans coaching staff. They had a lot of guys that were helping out in 08 and 09, and you saw the numbers that Schaub and Andre Johnson were able to put up. You fast forward a couple of years after Gary Kubiak, and I mean, Bill O'Brien was never able to figure out like the best offensive coordinator to work with him. People were excited when Tim Kelly came in. How did that work? They were excited when who was the quarterback coach that came from the Seattle Seahawks, who ended up going back to the Seattle Seahawks? There's some older guy, I forget his name, but he came in. I think he came in either 2017 or 2018. That didn't last very long. Tim Kelly comes in as offensive coordinator. How did that work with O'Brien? How did that work with David Culley? And then Lovie Smith. Like Lovie Smith was stuck with Pep Hamilton, who we all thought might be good last year, and Pep sucked. Like he was an awful offensive coordinator.
From 2008, 2009, you're forgetting Matt LaFleur was an offensive
Matt
assistant.
LaFleur also here, yeah. So, I mean, like, you had a lot of guys there. If you got good offensive assistants, great. And we don't know what to make of Bobby Slowick yet. He was in San Francisco. You hope that he's going to have some of the same, like, Kyle Shanahan magic. But for all we know, he's just a guy who was in the right place at the right time. And I think as far as year one expectations, like, mine are very tempered with DeMeco. My expectations with Ime Udoka, who has pelts on the wall, is that there is going to be immediate progress that you're going to see, and this will be a much more watchable team, even if they don't get Victor Wembanyama, which is still disastrous, but at least they got Udoka.
Because that is something that Ime has shown, is that he can walk into a situation in year one, elevate it.
Right.
And it took, until December with his season with the Celtics to really have it all click into place, and once it did, they're the best team in the league for the rest of that season, lost in the finals.
Yep.
Obviously, he's starting at a lower point with this Rockets team, but like Thomas said, they have a lot of cap space. They're going to make moves to get real helpful NBA players around these guys, something they really haven't been focused on the last 2 years. And so even starting from a lower point, I have faith that he will be able to elevate them to being decent.
Yeah.
Like being like an acceptably bad young team, which is really all you're looking for. It's like they're not a disaster.
Right. And you know what? There's no acceptably bad with the Rockets anymore. It's been a couple of years.
I just mean as being like the 11th seed, which is like you're not a good team if you're the 11th seed. But that is like showing the acceptable signs of improvement.
With the young talent you have, though, I almost feel like you got to be higher than that.
The Thunder were literally
playoffs,
the 10th seed last year. They're the biggest success in the NBA.
That's what we're looking for.
So I said the 11th seed. They need to be the 10th.
I want them in the play-in.
Okay,
I want them in.
Cool.
That.
Good correction.
Fair enough. You know what? Fair enough, Sean. It's semantics at this point. But look, I mean, the young talent's here. And it's not like you're beholden to your offensive line too, or your defensive line. Like the Texans' offensive line, a lot of potential. Defensive line, Jesus, that includes like with Will Anderson aboard, with Jerry Hughes still here, with Malik Collins, with Sheldon Rankin, some of the guys that they brought in. In basketball, there's only 5 guys on the court. It is, by default, a lot easier to make the transition to being like a watchable, competent product. I really loved seeing this from Ime Udoka in a piece with the Houston Chronicles, Jonathan Fagan, and talks about some of the options that the Rockets have as far as what they can do with the talent they have. His view of Alperen Şengün should excite the bleep out of you. When he was asked about Şengün, he said this: "It adds to the versatility you can have offensively when you have a big that can initiate offense, whether it's from the high post or off the block. You want to take advantage of his skill set." The Nikola Jokic comparisons that have been made between Jokic and Alperen Şengün are there for a reason, because he does some of the passing and has the vision and can score from different areas on the court. He's deadly in the pocket. You can hit him on the half roll, and he can make all the plays there. That just makes it easier for everyone else. A guy like Kevin Porter, who shot in the high 40s on spot-up threes, only took 2 a game. You want to use that, move him around, and have other guys initiate the offense to get him those shots. Şengün has a unique skill set that we want to take advantage of. I don't know if you make the entire offense go through Şengün, but it should go more so through Şengün. And Sean and I were talking about this before the show. One of the big frustrations of the last year is that when Şengün was on, Şengün was the most special player that the Rockets had. You can't argue that. And look, we're talking about it from an offensive perspective, no doubt about it. But when Şengün was on, it was holy smokes. And Şengün seemed to randomly deal with unnecessary, hard coaching from Stephen Silas based off of a lack of defense that his teammates were also not putting effort into. And it was driving us crazy. And Sean, when we went to that game that the Rockets played against the Raptors, I remember you said, why isn't the offense running through Şengün? And I was like, this is just so obvious. This seems like it was so obvious. And I mean, Stephen Silas, what the hell did he actually do as a head coach? But Udoka saying those things about Şengün should have all of us very excited.
Yeah, exactly. It shows that he's gonna bring new ideas to the table, and I really do think the more that we hear about what Ime's vision for the Rockets is, you kind of realize, wait, were we kind of giving Stephen Silas the benefit of the doubt, assuming all the bad stuff was just what Stone wanted and edicts from the front office about? I'm sure Stone was meddlesome in some way with Silas, but I think some of Silas just didn't really have a grasp of what he wanted to do with the talents of the young players, by the fact that Ime Udoka said all this stuff of what he's going to do different, and Stone is like, yep, sounds good. Yep. So there is a little bit of was Silas hiding, it was some criticism being directed at Stone, where some of it should have been more on.
It's a fair point.
On Silas.
It's a fair point.
Not absolving Stone at all, but just,
right.
The percentages might have been off.
I've been guns blazing on Stone, and it's mainly because I just don't think he was qualified to have the general manager gig, and that he got it because he was in the right place at the right time. But okay, whatever. Maybe he's good at negotiating contracts or something like that I'm not aware of. I think that is a fair point to make. I mean, Silas is the guy who's hands-on. My big issue is they should have taken Silas out back and capped him. Sorry to say it like that. Sorry to go all John Morant on you. But there was clearly no progress being made last year. And that team responded when John Lucas was running the team. They did. Every single time that John Lucas was the coach. And there were a couple of moments. Stephen Silas' father passed away. I'm sure he was dealing with a lot last year, too, that maybe has, it's an added factor on top of it. It would be awful to lose your father in the middle of an NBA season. Do you have any time to really deal with that? It would be awful. So, I want to make it clear, I don't think Stephen Silas was a good coach. I think he was a bit of a pushover. But I don't think he was a bad guy or anything like that. But they should have done something about it. I mean, and you can buy the guy out. Are the Fertittas not willing to sign that execution warrant to say execute Order 66? I don't know. But I think it's a fair point, Sean. And look, I will turn over a totally new page if Raphael Stone just drives up to the Fertittas' house, their mansion, just busts through wherever the gate is and drives on the front lawn. If he says no, we're not doing Harden, I'm back. Clean slate. Please do it.